Welcome to our regular webinar series where we invite leaders in our profession to discuss the relevant issues that are impacting advancement in our advancement programs today. We're fortunate to have a couple of different voices join us to discuss the impact name, image, and likeness policies are having in intercollegiate athletics and athletic fundraising. Matt Borman, who is the CEO of the Tiger Athletic Foundation at Louisiana State University, and Taylor Jacobs is the Director of NIL Initiatives and Education for the LSU Athletic Program. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Glad to be.
Tracy, let's start with you. Your position in itself is a little unusual. So I know you were working in compliance, but now you've got NIL added to your title. Tell us how your position has evolved.
Yeah, so, at the beginning of everything, we didn't really know what NIL was going to look like. And so LSU, before everything passed in the summer of 2021, we created a group of individuals from different sections of the department and a bunch of different areas to come together and prepare for NIL. So it did include myself from a compliance standpoint, but also just from a familiarity with social media and kind of what our student athletes are doing on a day-to-day basis. And we all started working on it, and it just was something that I took to very quickly. It was something I became very passionate about in educating our student athletes. And so for the last year, I did compliance and NIL to make them work together. And it became one of my, areas within compliance. And then everything has just evolved so quickly with the NIL landscape and everything that's changing. We decided that it would be best for me to shift my focus to solely NIL. So for the last month now, I've officially just been the NILSU department, and we are going to build this out and have more people on staff who can help in the NIL space. So it's exciting.
Well, congratulations. So you were describing this changing landscape, but maybe you can just set it up for us. Describe the environment that led to the introduction of NIL's policies to begin with.
Yeah, so I think the conversation has been going on for a while. I think everyone has felt that student athletes deserve the right to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And I think the Alston case at the Supreme Court was that was something that lit a fire under it, I think, in having that right for that opportunity for student athletes to have that additional academic enhancement money. And then certain states in the country, California and Florida being two of them, really decided they were going to be proactive and start putting forth state legislation within their states. And so when that conversation started happening after the Alston ruling, everyone decided we're going to start preparing for this because this is going to be something that is a new opportunity for our athletes. And so at LSU, like I said, we created that committee, and we heard from a bunch of different areas, TAF, compliance, academics, coaches, student athletes, and administrators. And we wanted to understand from everyone's perspective, how is NIL going to potentially impact your department, and what is it going to look like, and how are we going to evolve with it? So we had a great group initially, and we just set ourselves up to be prepared. Honestly, I don't think anyone knew what was going to come about July 1st of 2021. Each state wrote their own state legislations, and we decided, we wanted to have state laws. And then once we had all of those in place, the NCAA announced a very broad policy. It was way less restrictive than I think anyone anticipated, which then kind of set some states back a little bit because our state laws were more restrictive than what the NCAA had put out. So, we were prepared, and we had come together with a plan and an education plan, and we followed said plan, but it's just changed so fast that we've had to adapt, and we have to keep moving forward. And I think that's something that, we continue to say, we're just building the airplane as we fly it. So.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that plan, and given the fact that the NCAA came out with that broad policy, what specific steps are within your plan? What are the specific steps that you're taking?
So from the very beginning, we've had a very strong emphasis on education because this is so new for all of our student athletes. I started meeting with them before the state law passed just to ask how they were feeling about it. And I think overwhelmed was the overarching answer from everyone. So the education became extremely important, not only, understanding the time management aspect and the financial aspect, but additionally how they can benefit from it. Because I didn't want to throw something to them to say, hey, now you can participate in this, but not teach them how to participate in it if they wanted to. So the education was a huge piece for us from the beginning. And I would say that's really what we started with. That was our foundation of making sure we had prepared. We signed with Altia Sports Partners before everything passed last summer. And we were just prepared from an education standpoint. We wanted them to understand the value of their personal brand and engaging in NIL deals and what that could look like and the financial impacts it could have. And then as we've continued to navigate, we've learned that TAF now has a very big, I guess they're impacted in a very different way. So we've had to navigate those conversations, and sports properties is impacted because of the use of IP. And it's something that we've just continued to learn and continue to evolve. But I would say the education across the board for student athletes, staff, coaches, that was something that we put forth. We said we were going to educate, we were going to be there for them. We wanted them to know we were embracing it, and we wanted them to know we were going to help them through it.
It sounds so bringing all these different stakeholders along through this process, through this education must be amazing. It must be a challenge. Are there any lessons you've learned from this that if you were to do it all over again, you might do? What would you say is a takeaway from the work that you've done so far?
Oh man, probably a ton, but I think just being open-minded. I think that was something in the very beginning. I was excited about this. I was a student athlete back in the day. So this is something that I feel like I would have really been excited about had I been able to participate in name, image, and likeness opportunities. And so I truthfully think that is why I've enjoyed it so much, is because I have been open-minded and being willing to adapt to what's coming out and teaching them the same thing. Be open-minded to it. Every time I meet with a student athlete, I want them to know, like, it's okay to be fearful of it and it's okay to not participate in it. But if someone reaches out to you and you want to post something on Instagram, like, be open to the conversation, because it could be something that could be really fun for you. And we've even had some student athletes, they've shifted majors because they've learned that they like the digital marketing aspect, or they like the branding aspect, or they clothing design. They're learning throughout this process new things about themselves. Because they're being open to it.
I want to come back and talk about some of the benefits that you're seeing at LSU. But let me bring Matt into the conversation. So you've referenced TAF, the Tiger Athletic Foundation. But given the athletic department and the Tiger Athletic Foundation are separate entities, how are you working together? And Matt, maybe I'll invite you to on first, and Taylor, if you want to build on that, feel free.
Well, we work together on a daily basis because, like Taylor said, this is so new. We're building the plane as we're flying it. So we're in conversation with Taylor often and just making sure we're handling everything the right way. One thing Taylor didn't mention is the great work she's done. We're talking about lessons learned, and once again, it's a fluid situation. So we're trying to evolve as we move forward. But the state law that was put in place initially was pretty restrictive, and we couldn't, as an institution or as TAF, as an affiliate of the institution, we couldn't facilitate or get involved in any NIL conversations with donors or collectives. And so being able to get to a point where we worked with legislators, and Taylor was a major part of that with Verge Osbury and Scott Woodward, our athletic director, and Stephanie Remp, who now has moved on to Nevada in the past couple of days. But they were all huge in getting with those legislators to change the law and give us an opportunity to facilitate those deals and be more involved. And Taylor can even talk more about what that's meant to us.
Yeah, and I would just say, with us working together, I think that's something that I feel LSU has done extremely well, is that everybody who has been involved has been willing to have the conversation. This is impacting so many areas, and I think each department, as I continue to work with them and continue to talk with them, Matt specifically, he could have easily said, I want nothing to do with this, I want no part of this, but he was open-minded to it. And now we work together, we're going to make it work. I mean, it's here. And as much as I don't know that it's going away. And so I just think we've done a very good job at coming together and figuring out, like, it's here. How are we going to make it work for each individual group within the department? And I think that's what's made us successful.
So Taylor, you said before we got on that you hadn't had that much exposure to the Tiger Athletic Foundation before this came about. What have you learned? And maybe you have some insights into the fundraising business that Matt and I could learn from.
I think I've just learned a little bit more in depth about how they engage with people and with donors. And I think I had a very surface level understanding previously. I mean, from compliance, we just did general education every now and then, and we weren't as involved. And I think in this space, I've began to understand more about how the relationships that they build with donors and the conversations that they have. And, they've directed several people to me to talk about NIL, and just understanding that and the day-to-day of navigating, those conversations and building those relationships. I think it's important to them, and it's been a valuable lesson for me to learn as well.
No, it's what a resource to have for Matt to be able to direct a donor to. But so were you going to add something, Matt?
I just said, no question, that's a huge benefit for our staff.
So let's talk about one of the things that has surfaced as part of this, or organically surfaced, is this notion of collectives. So Matt, help us understand what a collective is, and then secondly, what form are they, or is it taking at LSU?
So I think collectives are unique to each institution, but as a whole, it is basically a group of donors that come together to try to collect funds in order to get them in the hands of student athletes on some level. Once again, Taylor is our NIL expert, so she would know a lot more about exactly what a collective is. Taylor, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I mean, to echo what Matt said, it's different institution by institution. We've heard a bunch of crazy things. The media's put a bunch of crazy things out there, but yes, the gist of it is, a group of individuals that have come together to assist in NIL opportunities, provide more NIL opportunities to student athletes. We've seen a variety of kinds across the country, but that's the bare bones of what they are.
And I think they're so valuable, Pete, sorry to interrupt you. We're not supposed to be using those for recruits or pay to play. And so we're not, and we're assuming other schools aren't as well. But why they are so valuable is the larger collective that you have, you can use that. Recruits can notice the number of dollars that a collective has, the funds that it has, and that can make a school more attractive to those individuals.
I see. So I appreciate that. So what form and shape is it taking at LSU, and how might it be different as you look at other collectives at other institutions?
So I think the media, and Taylor referenced the media earlier, and they love to do stories on the size of collectives and the rumors out there that may or may not be happening. But I think as your donors, especially in our case, were reading about what was going on in other institutions, they started feeling like we were behind. And so we had a group of donors that came together and said, we want to make sure that we have something in place to be able to compete with our peers. And so there's a small group of individuals here at LSU that have put a collective together. They're going out and talking to prospective donors and people that have helped TAF before, and seeing if they want to get involved in their third-party collective. Taylor, what can we add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it has formed, it's there. They've been very intentional to be educated. They've asked me for education. We have educated them on ways that they shouldn't be involved or could potentially be involved. And they, there has to be that quid pro quo exchange for the NIL deal. And I think they've done a good job at either finding businesses within the group that the student athletes can work with, and it is, they have that exchange, or coming up with ways. They've even gotten into like community engagement and tying stuff like that into it. So I think they've been very intentional, and they are they are listening to the education and they're open to the education. So.
And Pete, they're super valuable to LSU. And this is just a group of individuals that have other jobs, and they have spent a ton of time organizing this, doing the best that they can to put funds into the collective. And ultimately, it makes LSU more attractive to prospective student athletes and the ability to retain student athletes. So,
And, I was just going to add as well, the collectives, they're out there, they're happening. The media keeps sharing the numbers that they all have, but our student athletes are doing a very good job at getting NIL deals on their own, and they're going to continue to do that. And they're thriving. They really are. It's been exciting to see everything they're participating in. So this is a piece of it. And I think that, they're definitely out there. We're seeing what they're doing, but our student athletes are still thriving in the space just on their own as well.
Why doesn't that surprise me? Hey, Matt, how is this, and you mentioned that the collectives have gone out to talk with other donors who have been supportive of TAF. How has this impacted your fundraising results in the short term, and how will it affect your fundraising strategy going forward?
Well, it's tough to see how it's affecting our results right now, because luckily we do have some neat new things that are going on that have helped us be in a spot where we're ahead year over year. So it hasn't negatively impacted us in that way right now, but we're not naive enough to think that it's not impacting us at all. And so we know that there's only a certain number of dollars out there that donors can spend. But at the same time, it's our job to spread that message that you can support LSU in a ton of different ways right now. And NIL would be one of them. And if that negatively impacts our fundraising results, it's our job to still get out there and spread our message and make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to give back through TAF. But there are multiple ways to give back now, and we understand that. I think a story that comes to mind about that, though, is I was talking to the gentleman that runs our collective, and this was a few months after they had gotten that started. And he said, we've got to stop competing with each other. I feel like I'm going to sit down and ask people to give to the collective. And they said they just gave to a new facility project that you're working on. And deep down, that made me smile and say, because our guys are doing a good job in getting out. If multiple people that you're getting in front of are saying, I can't do this right now because I've already given to TAF in a major gift commitment. But at the same time, what I said to him is we are certainly not competing, and we want people to step up to the plate and help the third party collective. And ultimately, if individuals that we're talking to say, I've already given to the collective, we're going to have a conversation where we try to show them the value of giving to both. But it's a weird situation. It's a place we've never been, but someone could step up, give to the collective, and still be helping out LSU just as much as they are when they give to us.
To add something to that, even some of the donors that they've directed my way to ask more questions about NIL, this is something, I think I said it at our board meeting as well. You can still give to TAF and it be beneficial to the NIL space, because there's still so much education that we're doing, and we're putting on events where we're connecting student athletes with mentors and potential job opportunities and potential NIL opportunities. So there's still so much that we have to do as a department to educate and provide opportunity for them. Might not be directly through an NIL deal, but it's the education piece of it, which is huge. And so I think a lot of people have seen that and have seen value in that. We've done several events through NILSU that I think our donors have been able to be a part of and see that education in action. And that's been really helpful and really cool.
I want to come back to the messaging in a second, but Matt, when you were talking, it sort of reminded me of some of the prospect management policies that we talk about when you have an alum of the law school who played basketball who is suddenly having a fundraiser show up from the law school on a Tuesday and athletics on a Thursday. Are you getting any pushback from donors who are saying, listen, I need you guys to coordinate?
You know what, Pete, and we haven't. And it's very important to have that coordination with the General Foundation. And I think, all our institutions have done a good job and gotten better at that over the years. This is unique, and maybe I'm wrong, but ultimately we want these individuals to try to do both. And so we want to keep it separate on some level. And we definitely want them to have those conversations with the collective if they're interested. But we kind of want to take advantage of the fact that we have to be hands off. And so the donors have not expressed a frustration yet. I'm sure at some point that would come. But right now with the law just changing in the last week, I'm still not sure. We'd have to check with Taylor if we could have prospect meetings with the collective. That's not anything that we're dealing with right now.
So it's interesting, and I know how important human capital is to Scott, the LSU athletic director. Has this impacted your ability to raise scholarship funds, given the sort of similarity in terms of supporting students?
So I don't think the NIL space and the collective or NIL as a whole would really impact one specific type of fundraising, whether it's scholarships, capital funds, annual giving, operational funds. What I think is in our setup, and each institution is probably going to be very unique here, the way we've set it up is our student athletes are participating in NIL through deals that they're doing on an individual basis with companies. And then we have a collective as well that's really just collecting higher end donors. So where we are we have a void right now in our NIL space are those annual type dollars, the $100 to $1,000, couple $1,000 that people may want to give to this space. LSU really doesn't have a way to do that unless individuals are getting in contact with student athletes on their own. And so why I say that is where it's impacted us the most is in the major giving space, because the collective may be going out and getting X thousands of dollars from these individuals. And that certainly can impact when our gift officers are in front of those individuals asking for a commitment as well. So it's impacting our major giving. I don't think it's impacting our annual giving, our annual scholarship fund, and our drive at this point.
So, okay, that's helpful to know. So take us inside the conversation that your gift officers are having with these donors. What are the messages that they're delivering?
So first off, we don't go into donor meetings necessarily talking on the agenda to talk about NIL, but it's such a hot topic. Those donors are going to bring it up. Some want to know what's going on. They want to know how they can get involved, and some want to just express a frustration with where college athletics is right now, and they don't think this is where it should be. So the message our gift officers are out there. First off, what we're letting everybody know is whether we like it or not, college athletics is changing. And if we don't adapt, we're going to fall behind and not be able to compete with our peers. And so we'll talk it through with them there. We'll let them know we're not necessarily ever making an ask for the collective or telling them that that's where we want them to go. But if the conversation is guided towards by the donor that they really want to be involved in this space, that's when we're giving them the message that they can talk to Taylor and learn more about it. But also we can now tell them that they can go to the collective and support NIL through that space as well. Taylor, do we need to be having a different message? I guess I should ask.
No. I mean, I think that's just the reality of what it is, right? I think that's in general, people ask me all the time, like, why would you talk to a collective? Because in some instances, they kind of have this negative, aura around them. But the education piece, like, I would rather educate them and let them know what they should be doing. And same thing with Matt and his staff. I would rather them educate their donors and help them better understand it, because it's here to stay. I don't anticipate them taking NIL away. It's, the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah.
Pete, the great thing is last night our collective had an event, and I was able to be there based on the change in the law. And I think what was important to the collective there and the managers of that group is they wanted the donors that they had invited there to see that we are supportive. We're not necessarily having to do anything for it, but at least when they're getting the questions, when they're asking individuals in the community to become more involved, and they, like Taylor said, it seems a little bit off when you're asking for a collective. You don't know with the rules changing what's right and what's not. So just being able to have a presence there and show that we're supporting what they're doing, that meant a lot to them, and hopefully helps them be more successful.
You both alluded to the fact that there have been some recent updated guidelines. Can you help us to understand what those are and how those, where did they come from and what precipitated them, and what are the implications for them? Taylor, maybe
I'll let you handle that one.
So as I mentioned last summer, I think every state, for the majority of states, put together their own state legislation to be in line with what they thought the NCAA would announce. Most of those state laws were more restrictive than what the NCAA did end up announcing. And so I think a lot of us have just adapted. Some states repealed their laws, some states amended them, which is what we did, just not to take anything off the table or to say we're trying to do anything that the NCAA would prohibit, but we had extra verbiage in our state law that, you know, it didn't allow the facilitation piece. It didn't allow for board members who might have a separate business unrelated to their position on a board to participate in an NIL deal. And so we removed that. Again, not saying that our institution is now paying student athletes or we're doing anything. That's not it. It's, again, just allowing us to be more involved from an education standpoint. And where we reference it is, it's more about making sure these athletes are being connected with these opportunities. It's not us going out and saying, you know, okay, I'm going to get this amount for this student athlete and this amount for this student athlete. It's genuinely providing the same opportunity to all, and now being able to educate them on a deeper level. So that was the main changes for our state law. We actually also added protection from public record requests when it comes to the student athletes and the terms of their contracts with an individual business. We've seen an increase in public record requests over the last year. And in fact, we had a trial that we were involved in, and that's their business. That's their business transaction. It's their deal. And so we added that to our state legislation too, which I'm proud that we were able to add that, because I don't think a lot of people have thought about dealing with that. So those were statewide changes. Recently, the NCAA, where they've come back out to add more, I guess, guidelines, would be in the recruiting space specifically, and probably more directed at this collective piece, because I do think what we've seen in the media is collectives are meeting with recruits and they're promising numbers and they're doing all these things. So the NCAA is being very forthcoming and saying this is not to be used in recruiting. This is not to be used for pay for play, which again is why we are educating everyone so much, is because we want them to understand, like, this is what would be considered being used for recruiting, and this is just doing an NIL deal. You know, there's differences in how you engage. And so those are the main changes that we've seen in guidelines.
Taylor, this is the last question for you guys. You had mentioned that you were a student athlete, and that if you were a student now, that you'd want to benefit from this arrangement. Give us some insight into the benefits that these students are seeing. Help us to better appreciate what this means to the student athlete.
I mean, obviously there's a financial benefit for those who are being compensated. But I just think they're open to making so many new connections. And I think that is where I've seen a lot of them benefit from it. You know, as they get to engage with more people and learn how to network and learn how to engage in a business transaction, they're preparing themselves more for life after college, in my opinion. And that's a huge piece of how we're educating, is making sure they understand, okay, we've been telling you that what you put on social media is important, but now this is what a business is looking at when they're deciding if they're going to do an NIL deal with you. And I've had several conversations with student athletes, and they've said, you know, either one, this business was really awesome that I did this NIL deal with, and now I have an internship with that company because I was super interested in their product and what they're doing, which is, I mean, that's amazing that they have access to those opportunities. But then additionally, just having a conversation. You know, I remember I graduated and I started working at the institution that I graduated from. So I think I cheated a little bit because I did never really have to interview, but now they know how to engage and how to interview because they're learning in these deals, even if it's, you know, a Zoom transaction with a company or just negotiating the contract or even working with their agent and having these conversations. If they have agent representation, they're learning how to navigate life, the space that comes after college, I think, better. So that's what I think I would have benefited from as an athlete, and it would have prepared me more for work, I think. And I think I'm seeing that in our student athletes as well.
Yeah, well, I think LSU's lucky to have you in your role, despite the fact that you didn't benefit from these things. And you both have been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining this. This has been super valuable, and I want to thank everybody else for joining us today on this webinar. Should you have any questions, whether it's about this conversation that we've had today, or about our firm, or other issues that are relevant to you that you think we should be encouraging discourse, please let us know. And again, Taylor and Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We're grateful to you.
Great. Thanks for having us, Pete.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
us.